The crystalline formations of Kepler 442b's northern continent stretched like frozen lightning across the amber landscape, their surfaces reflecting the twin suns in patterns that had mesmerized xenobiologists for decades. Dr. Sarah Chen crouched behind one such formation, her breath forming small clouds in the thin atmosphere as she adjusted her field scanner. The readings were unlike anything in the databases. Massive, warm-blooded, and definitely alive. "Control, this is Field Team Alpha," she whispered into her comm device. "We've got movement in Sector 7. Whatever it is, it's big." The Zephyrian. Research vessel Luminous Thought maintained its position 3 kilometers above the surface, its crew of 8-limbed scientists monitoring every human movement with growing anxiety. Commander Veltar's photosynthetic skin had shifted to a deep purple, a color his species displayed only when confronting their deepest fears. The humans approached the Devourer's territory. He clicked to his second-in-command. "Their scans must have detected it. We should recall them immediately." "But sir," senior researcher Krixtal replied, her own skin flickering between orange and yellow, "our agreements with Earth specify non-interference during their expeditions. They've been warned about the dangerous fauna." Sarah's team pressed forward through the crystal maze, following the heat signature that grew stronger with each step. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez checked his medical kit for the 3rd time, while xenobiologist Dr. Yuki Tanaka documented every crystal formation they passed. The 4th member, communications specialist Jake Morrison, maintained constant contact with their orbiting ship. The creature they sought had been the subject of Zephyrian nightmares for generations. Standing 4 meters at the shoulder, with midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light itself, the Devourer possessed 6 powerful limbs, ending in claws that could slice through their ship's hull. Its 3 eyes burned like molten gold, and its maw contained rows of teeth designed for tearing through the toughest materials. Most terrifying of all were the bone spikes that protruded from its spine and shoulders, weapons that had ended the exploration careers of countless Zephyrian survey teams. As the humans rounded a particularly large crystal formation, they found their quarry. The massive creature lay on its side, trapped beneath a collapsed crystal structure that had pinned its rear legs. Dark blue blood pooled around the injury site, and the beast's breathing came in labored gasps. Its golden eyes tracked their movement, but there was no aggression, only pain and exhaustion. "Jesus!" Jake breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm before stopping. "Look at the size of that thing." Dr. Chen approached slowly, her scanner beeping steadily as it analyzed the creature's vital signs. Severe trauma to the posterior extremities, possible internal bleeding. Heart rate elevated but not critical. She looked back at her team. "It's been trapped here for hours, maybe days." Above them, the Zephyrian crew watched in horror as the humans drew closer to the wounded predator. Commander Veltar's skin had now turned completely black, the color of mourning. "Prepare the memorial protocols," he ordered quietly. "We're about to witness the end of Earth's first interstellar exploration team. But instead of the expected carnage, something unprecedented occurred." Dr. Rodriguez knelt just outside the creature's reach and began unpacking his medical supplies. "Sarah, can you get a better reading on those leg injuries? I'm seeing compound fractures." The Devourer's massive head lifted slightly, its 3 golden eyes focusing on the small beings that showed no fear. In all its years as the apex predator of Kepler 442b, it had never encountered anything like these creatures. They moved with purpose but without aggression, their strange calls to each other carrying tones of concern rather than challenge. Sarah noticed the creature's breathing becoming more labored. "We need to act fast. Whatever this species is, it's losing too much blood." She looked at the crystal debris pinning its legs. "Jake, check our equipment manifest. Do we have anything that could lift this?" As the humans began discussing rescue, Strategies. The creature made a sound none of them expected, a low, rumbling call that wasn't quite a roar, but wasn't quite a purr either. It was the sound of confusion, of an apex predator encountering something that defied every instinct it possessed. In the luminous thought, senior researcher Krixtal's skin flickered rapidly between colors, unable to process what she was witnessing. "Commander, are we recording this?" "Every moment," Veltar replied, his voice barely a whisper, "though I doubt anyone will believe it." Dr. Marcus Rodriguez had treated everything from injured wolves in Yellowstone to aggressive bulls on his family's ranch in Texas, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of golden eyes the size of dinner plates watching his every movement. The creature, which their preliminary scan suggested was some sort of apex predator, lay as still as a statue while he approached with his medical kit. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus murmured, using the same tone he'd employed with countless injured animals on Earth. "Let's see what we can do about those legs." The beast's massive head tracked his movement, but there was something almost curious about its gaze. Marcus had seen that look before, in the eyes of a wounded grizzly he'd helped rescue near Glacier National Park. It was the look of an intelligent creature trying to determine whether these strange new beings were threats or allies. Above the crystal formations, the Zephyrian research vessel continued its anxious vigil. Commander Veltar paced the bridge, his 8 limbs creating a complex rhythm against the deck plating. His crew had been stationed on Kepler 442b for 3 standard cycles, and they'd lost 2 survey teams to creatures exactly like the one the humans were now approaching with casual confidence. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Thexim, "I'm detecting increased vascular activity in the Devourer's cranial region. It appears to be observing them." "Of course it's observing them," Veltar snapped, his skin flashing irritated orange. "It's deciding which one to eat first." But as the minutes passed, the expected attack never came. Instead, Dr. Chen had deployed a portable field scanner and was taking detailed readings of the creature's injuries. The device's soft beeping seemed to intrigue the beast, whose massive ears, previously pinned back against its skull in pain, began to perk up with interest. "Fascinating," Dr. Tanaka recorded into her personal log. "Subject demonstrates clear signs of higher intelligence. Eye tracking suggests active analysis of our behavior and equipment. No signs of aggressive posturing, despite obvious territorial position." Jake Morrison, meanwhile, had contacted their orbiting ship for additional supplies. "Control, we're going to need the heavy lift graviton jack and the portable surgery unit. We've got a wounded, He paused, looking at the massive creature. "What do we call this thing?" "How about Midnight?" Sarah suggested, noting the creature's light-absorbing black scales. Those markings along its neck almost looked like a collar pattern. The creature, now dubbed Midnight, made another of those rumbling sounds, this one distinctly different from the first. If they hadn't known better, the humans might have sworn it sounded almost pleased. Marcus had been slowly working his way closer, medical scanner in hand. His experience with large predators had taught him to read body language and everything about Midnight's posture suggested controlled curiosity rather than predatory intent. The massive claws remained sheathed, the powerful tail lay still, and most tellingly, the creature's breathing had slowed to match the calm rhythm of someone concentrating rather than preparing to strike. "I'm going to try something," Marcus announced, reaching into his pack. He pulled out an emergency ration bar, standard high-protein fare designed for human consumption during long field missions. Breaking off a piece, he tossed it gently toward Midnight's massive head. The chunk landed just in front of the creature's muzzle. 3 golden eyes focused on the offering with intense interest. A nostril the size of a coffee cup flared as Midnight investigated the scent. Then, with surprising delicacy for such a massive creature, a tongue emerged and carefully collected the morsel. The reaction was immediate and unexpected. Midnight's eyes widened. The rumbling sound grew louder and more sustained, and, most shocking of all, the creature's massive tail began to move in what could only be described as a gentle wagging motion. Aboard the luminous thought, the silence on the bridge was absolute. Senior researcher Krixtal's skin had gone completely white, the Zephyrian equivalent of shock. "Commander," she whispered, "I believe we may need to revise our threat assessment protocols." "The Devourer is playing?" Officer Thexim added, incredulous. Below, Sarah had finished her preliminary scans and was setting up the graviton jack to lift the crystal debris. "Midnight seems to understand we're trying to help. Look at how it's positioned itself, giving us the best access to the trapped limbs while keeping its head where it can monitor our work." As if responding to her observation, Midnight shifted slightly, moving its massive head closer to the humans. The movement was slow, deliberate, and entirely non-threatening. When Dr. Chen reached out instinctively to pat what looked like the creature's equivalent of a shoulder, Midnight actually leaned into the touch. Marcus shook his head in amazement. "I've seen this before with injured wildlife. Once they realize you're not a threat and you're trying to help, some of the most dangerous animals become incredibly cooperative." "But this isn't just cooperation," Yuki observed, continuing her recordings. "This is active communication. Look at the way it's watching our faces, responding to our tones. This creature has a sophisticated understanding of social interaction." As the graviton jack began to lift the crystal debris, Midnight made another sound, this one clearly expressing relief and gratitude. It was a sound that would haunt Zephyrian nightmares for generations to come, not because it was terrifying, but because it was so utterly, unmistakably friendly. The graviton jack hummed with increasing intensity as it lifted the massive crystal formation that had trapped Midnight's rear legs. Dr. Rodriguez positioned himself carefully, medical scanner in one hand, surgical kit in the other. In all his years treating large animals, he'd never worked on anything quite this scale, but the principles remained the same. Clean the wounds, stabilize the brakes, and keep the patient calm. "Vitals are holding steady," Sarah reported from her monitoring station. "Heart rate actually decreased when we started the extraction. I think it knows we're helping." Midnight's massive head had turned to watch the procedure, those three golden eyes tracking every movement with intense interest. When Marcus approached with an antiseptic spray, the creature made a soft questioning sound. Not quite a growl, but definitely an inquiry. "I know, buddy," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same gentle confidence he'd used with injured horses on his family's ranch. "This might sting a bit, but it'll help prevent infection." The antiseptic spray hissed as it made contact with the wounds. Midnight's entire body tensed for a moment, claws extending slightly. But then, incredibly, the creature forced itself to relax. It was a display of self-control that impressed even the skeptical Dr. Tanaka. "Remarkable," she muttered into her recorder. "Subject demonstrates not only trust, but active cooperation in medical treatment. Pain tolerance suggests either exceptional discipline or previous experience with healing processes." Above them, the Zephyrian research vessel maintained its vigil, but the mood aboard had shifted from mourning to bewilderment. Commander Veltar stood at the observation deck, his skin cycling through colors that had no precedent in Zephyrian emotional expression. "How long has it been since first contact?" he asked his crew. 2 hours, 17 minutes, replied Officer Thexim. "No signs of aggression. The Devourer appears to be purring." The sound drifting up from the crystal formations was indeed reminiscent of a massive cat's purr, though deeper and more resonant. It was a sound that vibrated through the ground itself, creating harmonic patterns in the nearby crystal structures. Marcus had finished cleaning the wounds and was now setting up a portable bone regeneration unit, technology that would stabilize the fractures and accelerate healing. As he positioned the device, Midnight did something that defied every piece of conventional wisdom about apex predators. It lifted its injured leg slightly, adjusting the angle to give the human better access. "Did you see that?" Jake whispered into his comm. "It's helping with its own surgery." The bone regeneration unit activated with a soft blue glow, bathing Midnight's injuries in healing energy. The creature watched the process with fascination, occasionally making soft rumbling sounds that seemed to express wonder rather than discomfort. Dr. Chen had moved closer to Midnight's head, ostensibly to monitor cranial activity, but increasingly drawn by simple curiosity. The creature's scales, which had appeared purely black from a distance, actually contained subtle patterns of deep blue and purple that shifted with the light. Along the neck and shoulders, the scale patterns formed intricate designs that were almost decorative. "You're beautiful," she found herself saying, reaching out to touch the scales near Midnight's ear. The creature's response was immediate, a gentle nuzzle that nearly knocked her off balance, despite its obvious restraint. This interaction triggered something unprecedented. Midnight began to vocalize, not the threatening roars or snarls the Zephyrians had documented, but a complex series of sounds that varied in pitch and rhythm. It was almost like singing. "Are you recording this?" Sarah called to Jake, who was frantically adjusting his equipment every second. "But Sarah, I don't think our xenolinguistics programs are equipped for this. These vocalizations have tonal complexity that suggests actual language structure." Dr. Tanaka moved closer with her analysis equipment. "The harmonic patterns are incredibly sophisticated. This isn't just emotional expression, this is communication." As if responding to their discussion, Midnight shifted its attention to each human in turn, making distinctly different sounds for each one. For Marcus, working on its legs, the sounds were low and rhythmic, almost like a musical version of "thank you." For Sarah, monitoring its vital signs, the tones were higher, more questioning. For Jake, with his recording equipment, the sounds were playful, almost teasing. But for Dr. Chen, still standing near its massive head, Midnight produced something entirely different, a complex melody that seemed to contain multiple harmonies, as if the creature possessed multiple vocal cords capable of producing chord structures. "It's singing to us," she whispered in amazement. "Each song is different, personalized." The healing process continued for another hour, during which time the humans learned more about interspecies communication than years of theoretical study had taught them. Midnight proved to be not just intelligent, but remarkably emotionally sophisticated. When Marcus had to perform a particularly painful adjustment, the creature gripped a nearby crystal formation with its massive claws rather than risk accidentally harming its helpers. When Jake's equipment accidentally produced a harsh feedback squeal, Midnight immediately moved to shield the humans with its body, despite its own injuries. And when Dr. Chen showed signs of fatigue from the long procedure, the creature actually adjusted its position to provide her with a comfortable place to rest against its massive flank. "Therapeutic procedure complete," Marcus announced finally. "Bone regeneration is proceeding normally. Wounds are clean and sealed. Our patient should make a full recovery." Midnight's response was a sound unlike any they'd heard before, a deep, resonant note that seemed to come from the creature's very soul. It was clearly an expression of profound gratitude, one that needed no translation. Above them, Commander Veltar finally spoke the words that would change interspecies relations forever. "Officers, I believe we need to completely reconsider our classification system. What we've been calling the Devourer. I think we've been wrong about everything." 3 days after the initial rescue, the crystal formations of Sector 7 had become an unlikely gathering place. Dr. Chen's team had established a temporary research camp, ostensibly to monitor Midnight's recovery, but increasingly because none of them could bring themselves to leave. The massive creature had become as much a part of their daily routine as morning coffee and equipment checks. Midnight, for its part, seemed equally reluctant to see them go. Despite its legs healing rapidly, thanks to the bone regeneration treatment, the creature had made no effort to return to whatever territory it had come from. Instead, it had claimed a large flat area near the human camp as its resting spot, positioning itself where it could observe all their activities. Day 3 post-treatment, Dr. Tanaka recorded into her personal log. Subject continues to demonstrate unprecedented social integration behaviors. This morning I observed the creature carefully moving crystal debris to create what can only be described as a more comfortable seating area for our team. The observation was accurate. Overnight, Midnight had used its massive claws to carefully arrange several smaller crystal formations into chair-like structures positioned around what had become the human's morning briefing circle. The precision required for such work, especially given the creature's size, suggested not only intelligence but genuine concern for their comfort. Dr. Rodriguez had developed perhaps the strongest bond with their unexpected patient. His daily medical checkups had evolved into something resembling playtime, with Midnight presenting each healed leg for inspection like a dog showing off for treats. The creature had learned to recognize the sound of Marcus unpacking his medical kit and would immediately position itself for examination. Healing rate is remarkable, Marcus reported to their orbiting ship. Cellular regeneration is proceeding 300% faster than our projections. I'm starting to think this species has evolved enhanced healing capabilities specifically to recover from the kind of injuries that would be fatal to most creatures. But it was Jake Morrison who made the discovery that changed everything. As the team's communications specialist, he'd been analyzing Midnight's vocalizations, trying to determine if the creature's complex songs contained actual linguistic content. On the morning of day 4, his equipment detected something extraordinary. "Sarah, you need to hear this," Jake called, his voice tight with excitement. He played back a recording from the previous evening when Midnight had been producing its usual repertoire of evening songs. But underneath the audible frequencies, his sensors had detected subsonic patterns of incredible complexity. "Those aren't just songs," he announced. "They're conversations. Midnight has been calling to others of its species." The implications hit them all simultaneously. If Midnight was communicating with other members of its species, and if those communications included information about the humans, their answer came sooner than expected. Dr. Chen was conducting her morning equipment check when she heard it, a distant answering call that made the crystal formations around them ring like bells. Then another call from a different direction, then another. Guys," she called to her team. "I think we're about to have company." They emerged over the horizon like something out of mythology. 3 more creatures identical to Midnight, moving with the fluid grace of apex predators, but showing none of the aggressive posturing they might have expected. Instead, the newcomers approached with obvious curiosity, their massive heads tilted at angles that suggested questioning rather than threatening. Midnight's reaction was immediate and joyful. The creature rose to its feet, moving easily despite its recent injuries, and produced a complex series of calls that were clearly introductions. The responding vocalizations from the newcomers were equally complex, and the humans found themselves witnessing what could only be described as a family reunion. "Are we in danger?" Marcus asked quietly, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm, but Dr. Chen, who had been studying Midnight's behavior patterns, shook her head. "Look at their body language. If they were aggressive, Midnight would be showing defensive behaviors. Instead, it's presenting us." She was right. Midnight had positioned itself between the humans and the newcomers, but not as a barrier, as an intermediary. The creature was making alternating calls to its companions and to the human team, clearly facilitating introductions. The largest of the newcomers, even bigger than Midnight, with scales that contained hints of deep red along with the characteristic black, approached slowly. its three golden eyes focused intently on Dr. Chen, who found herself stepping forward almost involuntarily. "Easy," she murmured, using the same tone that had worked so well with Midnight. "We're friends." The massive creature stopped just outside, arm's reach, and lowered its enormous head. The gesture was unmistakable, an invitation. Dr. Chen looked back at her team, all of whom nodded encouragingly, then reached out to touch the creature's scales. The response was immediate. A deep, rumbling purr and a gentle nuzzle that nearly knocked her off her feet. "Incredible," Dr. Tanaka breathed. "Midnight has taught them that humans are safe. It's vouched for us." The next few hours were unlike anything in the annals of xenobiology. The four massive creatures, the team had dubbed the newcomers Ruby, Onyx, and Storm based on their scale colorations, began what could only be described as showing off for their human visitors. They demonstrated their hunting techniques on crystal formations, their complex vocalizations, and their sophisticated social hierarchies. But most remarkably, they began bringing gifts. Ruby approached with a cluster of particularly beautiful crystals that she deposited carefully near the human camp. Storm contributed what appeared to be edible fruits from somewhere deeper in the continent. Onyx, the youngest of the group, seemed content to simply lie near the humans and produce soothing harmonic sounds. Above them, the Zephyrian research vessel had been joined by two additional ships from the home fleet. The Bridge of the Luminous. Thought now hosted Admiral Zexkala herself, the highest-ranking Zephyrian xenobiologist in this sector of the galaxy. "Admiral," Commander Veltar reported, "we're observing unprecedented behavior. Multiple devourers are actively socializing. With the human research team, no signs of aggression from either species." Admiral Zexkala's skin had cycled through every color in the Zephyrian emotional spectrum at least twice since her arrival. "Commander, how long have we been studying this species?" 47 standard cycles, Admiral. We've lost 12 research teams to devourer attacks in that time. And in 4 days, these humans have accomplished what we couldn't in 47 cycles. She paused, watching the impossible scene below. "I believe, Commander, that we've been looking at this entirely wrong. These aren't monsters. They're people." 2 weeks had passed since first contact, and the crystal formations of Sector 7 had been transformed into something unprecedented in interspecies relations, a genuine community. The human research camp now occupied the center of a rough circle, formed by the resting areas of Midnight's family group, which had grown to include 2 additional adults and 3 juveniles that were barely larger than Earth elephants. Dr. Chen stood at the edge of their camp, watching the morning routine that had evolved naturally between the 2 species. Marcus was conducting his daily medical rounds, checking on a minor cut that Storm had acquired during yesterday's crystal hunting expedition. The massive creature lay on its side like a contented house cat, rumbling with pleasure as Marcus cleaned the wound. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison sat cross-legged beneath Ruby's massive head, his recording equipment capturing the intricate lessons in devourer language that the red-scaled creature seemed determined to teach him. The vocalizations were incredibly complex, but Jake was beginning to recognize patterns, questions, statements, expressions of affection, and what seemed to be proper names for each member of the group. "Control, this is Dr. Chen," Sarah spoke into her communicator. "Daily report, day 14. All human team members healthy and accounted for. Our hosts continue to demonstrate remarkable social complexity. I'm beginning to think we need to completely revise our understanding of apex predator behavior." The response came not from their orbiting ship, but from an unexpected source, the Zephyrian vessel Luminous Thought. "Dr. Chen, this is Admiral Zexkala. May we request permission to join you on the surface?" Sarah exchanged glances with her team, First contact protocols were clear. Humans were not authorized to make decisions about alien visitation without Earth Command approval. But looking around at the peaceful scene, surrounded by creatures that the Zephyrians had classified as monsters, the protocol seemed absurdly inadequate. "Admiral, you're welcome to land, but I should warn you, our friends here are very protective. Any signs of aggression or fear might be misinterpreted." "Dr. Chen," came the Admiral's reply, "after observing your interactions for the past 2 weeks, I believe the Zephyrian Union has much to learn about the proper approach to interspecies relations." An hour later, the Zephyrian shuttle Contemplation touched down at the edge of the crystal formations. Admiral Zexkala emerged first, her skin cycling rapidly through nervous color patterns, followed by Commander Veltar and senior researcher Grixtal. Their 8-limbed forms moved with obvious trepidation as they approached the human camp. The reaction from Midnight's family was immediate but not aggressive. The massive creatures rose to their feet, forming a protective semicircle around the humans, their golden eyes fixed on the newcomers. The vocalizations they produced were complex, questioning, cautious, but not threatening. "Easy, everyone," Dr. Chen called, addressing both species. She approached Midnight, who had positioned itself as the clear leader of the group, and placed her hand on the creature's massive flank. "These are friends. They're like us, scientists, explorers." Midnight studied the Zephyrians intently, then produced a series of sounds that Jake had learned to recognize as questions. The creature was asking for reassurance, for confirmation that these newcomers were safe. "That's right," Sarah said gently. "They're here to learn, just like we were." Admiral Zexkala watched this exchange with growing amazement. Her skin had shifted to a deep blue, the Zephyrian color of profound revelation. "Commander Veltar," she whispered, "are we witnessing a human mediating between species?" The answer became clear as Midnight, apparently satisfied by Sarah's assurances, approached. The Zephyrian delegation, the massive creature, lowered its head in the same gesture it had first used with Dr. Chen, an invitation to make contact. Admiral Zexkala, despite 40 years of xenobiological training, found herself trembling as she reached out with one of her upper limbs to touch the creature's scales. The response was immediate, a gentle rumble of acceptance that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. "By the 7 suns," the Admiral breathed, "it's greeting me." What followed was 3 hours of the most remarkable interspecies diplomacy ever recorded. Midnight and its family demonstrated their intelligence, their social complexity, and their sophisticated communication systems. The juveniles, initially shy around the Zephyrians, gradually warmed up to the point where the smallest one, whom the humans had dubbed Pebble, was actively playing with Commander Veltar's equipment, Belt. But the most significant moment came when senior researcher Grixtal, overcome by scientific curiosity, approached Ruby with a portable scanner. The massive creature examined the device with interest, then, incredibly, positioned itself to provide optimal scanning angles, clearly understanding the scientific purpose of the examination. "Admiral," Grixtal reported, her voice filled with wonder, "these creatures aren't just intelligent, they're scientifically curious. Ruby is actively participating in her own examination." Dr. Tanaka, who had been documenting the entire exchange, made an observation that would reshape interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. "I think we've all been making the same mistake. We've been assuming that intelligence and social cooperation are rare traits, limited to species that look like us or think like us. But maybe the universe is full of people. They just don't look like what we expected people to look like." As the day wore on, it became clear that something historic was taking place. The Zephyrians, who had feared these creatures for generations, found themselves welcomed into a complex social group. The humans, who had approached the situation with nothing more than basic compassion and veterinary training, had bridged a gap that had existed for centuries. As the twin suns of Kepler 442b began to set, painting the crystal formations in shades of gold and amber, the three species settled into what could only be described as a campfire gathering, though their fire was the natural bioluminescence that the adult devourers could produce from specialized scales along their necks. "Admiral," Dr. Chen said, as they sat surrounded by massive creatures who purred like cats and Zephyrians whose skin glowed with contentment, "I think we're going to need to rewrite the first contact protocols." Admiral Zexkala's skin shifted to a warm golden hue, the Zephyrian color of joy. "Dr. Chen, I think we're going to need to rewrite everything." Above them, midnight lifted its massive head and began the evening song, a complex melody that now included harmonic contributions from its family, responsive chirps from the Zephyrians, and even Jake's attempts at vocal participation. It was the sound of three species, learning that the universe was far less lonely than any of them had imagined.